Everything began in silence, an empty road, a small home, a household trying to hold on to the last scraps of peace inside a city that had learned to live in chaos as if chaos were normal. Then came a knock at the door. Not a polite knock, but frantic pounding as if time itself were running out. And in that instant, a cold feeling ran down the spine tonight. Something irreversible is about to happen. Outside, voices began to rise. Panic spread like fire in the wind. Every passing minute grew heavier than the one before. And just when hope seemed to go out, God would pull them out. Not with a loud theatrical miracle, but with a hand gripping tightly and a command that allowed no delay. Behind them, an entire city would rush headlong into its destiny. And once the sky changed color, nothing would be in time anymore. Step with us into the moment Sodom and Gomorrah faced their horrifying end. That afternoon on the hills near Hebron, wind moved through the oaks, carrying the smell of dry earth. Abraham sat at the entrance of his tent. Old age weighed on his shoulders, but his eyes were still bright, not because he was strong, but because he had learned to live with the living God. Then 3 strangers appeared. No warning, no hoofbeats, no entourage. Abraham sprang to his feet, as if his spirit recognized something his eyes had not yet understood. He hurried to serve them warm bread milk, tender meat, and while everything looked like an ordinary meal, the air itself felt heavy, as if it were hiding a verdict. When the meal was nearly finished, a word was spoken, not about weather but about sin. The cry of Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and their sin is very grievous. Genesis 18:20. Abraham heard the name of that city, and his heart sank, because Lot, his nephew, was there. The one he had guided, the one he had given land to, the one he had once rescued from war. What did Abraham want? He wanted his family safe. He wanted the one he loved not to be swallowed by disaster. But what he needed in that moment was the courage to stand between justice and mercy, to intercede even when what was coming was terrifying. Abraham stepped away from the tent and looked toward the plain, as if staring into a dark region. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't dare sound confident. He simply drew near to God, like someone who knew he was small, yet refused to stay silent while others were about to die. Behold, now I have taken upon me to speak unto the Lord, which am but dust and ashes. Genesis 18:27. It sounded like humility, but inside it was a trembling plea. Lord, if there are still righteous people, please do not destroy. And he began pleading with a large number, as if throwing a rope as far as possible to make sure it could still catch. Strangely, God did not brush him away. Abraham continued 45, 40, 30, 20, 10. Each time Abraham lowered the number, he pulled closer to the question that haunts every human heart. How far can justice walk with mercy? At the last request, Abraham nearly whispered, as if afraid his own breath might offend holiness. Oh, let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak yet. But this once, peradventure 10 shall be found there. Genesis 18:32. And when Abraham stopped at 10, perhaps he didn't to stop because he loved less. Perhaps he stopped because he had no strength left. He watched the sky darken, and inside him remained only a quiet, trembling hope.
Lord, don't forget Lot.
At the same time in Sodom, evening did not smell like peace. It smelled like oil lamps, hot city gates, and words people had gotten used to, words so familiar they no longer sounded dangerous. Lot was sitting at the city gate, where people watched life pass by and discussed life in half-truths and half-jokes. When 2 visitors entered near sunset, Lot immediately saw the difference. Not because they dressed strangely or spoke strangely, but because they were so quiet that everything loud around them suddenly seemed out of place. Scripture opens the scene with a simple sentence. And there came 2 angels to Sodom at even, and Lot sat in the gate of Sodom. Genesis 19:1. Lot bowed and urged them earnestly to come into his house. The visitors said they would stay in the open square, but Lot insisted, as if something inside him warned outside is not safe, even though the streets still carry laughter. Inside Lot's house, bread was baked. Quickly, food was set out in haste. Outside, the city remained noisy, but now noisy in a different way. As night closed in, the pounding began no longer knocking to ask, but pounding to demand. Footsteps crowded together. Voices called out. Lot stepped outside and pulled the door behind him like a man standing between danger and what he was trying to protect. He tried to speak to reason to stop it with words, but in that suffocating moment, Sodom's wealth revealed its deepest poverty of humanity. In the breathless tension, Lot was yanked back inside. The door slammed shut, and the angel spoke with a voice that allowed no delay. They must leave the city at once because the city would be destroyed. Lot ran to warn his future sons-in-law. He spoke like a man who jolted awake from a nightmare. "Up, get you out of this place, for the Lord will destroy this city." Genesis 19:14. But they thought he was joking. In Sodom, warnings sounded like comedy because people had lived so long in the night that they could not believe a sunrise could burn. Dawn approached. Lot returned home, and he hesitated, not because he didn't believe, but because the human heart gets tied to what is familiar. The house, the belongings, the routines. Sometimes the hardest thing is not knowing what is right, but leaving what is wrong once it has started to feel like home. And Scripture gives one sentence that is both gentle and fierce. "And while he lingered, the men laid hold upon his hand, and upon the hand of his wife, and upon the hand of his 2 daughters. And they brought him forth, and set him without the city." Genesis 19:16. They ran. The city behind them still stood still, glowed, still looked as if nothing were about to happen. That is the most terrifying trap, when a place is rotting yet still looks fine, when a life is wrong yet still has laughter. "Look not behind thee," they were told, not because God hates memory, but because some memories hook into the soul like barbs. Looking back isn't only turning your head, it's letting your heart be pulled back into what you were just rescued from. Lot ran ahead. His daughters followed, gasping feet slipping on stone. But Lot's wife ran behind her feet, moving forward, while her heart remained somewhere back there. She may have been thinking of the home, the jars, the bed, the things we have, a life that was wrong yet familiar. Then the sky changed color. It was no longer a gentle dawn, no longer soft pink. Light erupted behind them like a tear in the world. The air heated unnaturally. The ground seemed to tighten. Scripture says it in one sentence, so short it chills the bones. "Then the Lord rained upon Sodom and upon Gomorrah brimstone and fire from the Lord out of heaven." Genesis 19:24. Lot did not turn around. He only pulled his daughters forward. But Lot's wife looked back, not from simple curiosity, but as if in that 1 second she wanted to keep something familiar. Scripture records, "But his wife looked back from behind him, and she became a pillar of salt." Genesis 19:26. Lot could not stop, could not turn, could not save her. He ran on, and that grief surely followed him like a long shadow. The shadow of what he escaped, and the shadow of the one he could not bring with him. When they reached safety, they looked down. Sodom and Gomorrah were gone. Smoke rose like a furnace. The plain that had once been green became ash. But in the middle of judgment, Scripture quietly presses one line that catches in your throat. "And it came to pass when God destroyed the cities of the plain, that God remembered Abraham and sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow." Genesis 19:29. He remembered, not because Lot was perfect, but because someone had knelt down and interceded. Sodom and Gomorrah do not only speak of fire, they speak of a process. Evil slowly becomes normal. Normal becomes a right, and that right becomes violence. Abraham shows us that mature faith does not celebrate the fall of others, it intercedes. Lot shows us that grace is not always gentle. Sometimes it is a hand that grips hard and pulls you out while you are still hesitating. And Lot's wife is a silent warning. Some things feel so familiar that we call them home, but they are actually killing us. If today you sense God calling you to leave something wrong, don't wait until the sky changes color before you run. Let His hand lead you and ask for a heart brave enough not to look back.